everyone. Welcome back to another Wisdom Wednesday or Thoughtful Thursday, whenever this posts with me, Rose from Divine 1111. So, love. Ooh, I just felt the fear run through so many of y'all's bodies. Baby, love is scary, right? And it's funny because it's so fitting since it's like Halloween season. I didn't do it on purpose, but you know me, I have to meditate on what we talk about every week, and everything screamed love from the time I started thinking about it to the time I jumped in the car to go to my special place and meditate. Love was on the radio. Some of y'all, if y'all know Jodeci, Love You for Life was the song that came on the radio as soon as I cranked my car up. Like, it was just love all over the place. And so I was like, okay, God, I hear you. We're going to talk about love, okay? But, it's terrifying because it requires us to break down our walls of defense and reveal the most fragile parts of ourselves. And we hope and we pray that it's reciprocated from other people. Like, I don't care who you are, where you're from, it's always the same. We hope that the other person feels the same. And what happens when it's not reciprocated? What happens when we expose ourselves to a person only to have that trust broken? We start to lock our hearts down and our emotions up like Fort Knox. Okay, we start shutting people out that truly have our best interests at heart. We take on this state of paranoia that affects our future relationships. And harboring that paranoia, that fear, all of those negative emotions from our past experiences is what attracts more of that same energy. I don't know if y'all knew that or not. Maybe y'all did. If you've been watching me, I feel like I always talk about how energy is fluid. Like, you get what you give, okay? It's an equal exchange. So it's like, you put out negativity, that's what you're going to attract, okay? But it attracts the same type of people that broke our trust in the first place. And if this resonates with you so far, okay, drop a rose in the chat, in the comments, okay? First of all, and also close your eyes, all right? Think back to a time where you experienced your first heartbreak and how that affected you. Think about what happened in your relationships after that. Now, open your eyes. Was there a pattern? Did you notice a cycle of similar behavior? If so, it's time to break that cycle, baby. Break it on up and go within ourselves, okay? And it takes one to know one. So I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to use myself as an example, okay? Okay? So, gather around. I'm in my Marley mode. Come on, baby. Gather around. For story time, for me tell you a story, okay? I don't know if that sounded might have sounded a little Irish, but my grandmother would be rolling on the floor laughing. I butchered her accent, but anyways, story time, okay? Boys and girls and theys, okay? So, my first heartbreak was with my father. And, I know that sounds cliche. Everybody, especially women, a lot of us, we have, father or daddy issues or whatever. Same with men, like, you have mother issues, and it's because those are our first examples, those are our prime examples in this world. Okay, like they're supposed to be the ones to teach us not only how to love but how to receive it, how it should look, especially if you're interested in like the opposite sex. I'm not, feel what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be like, you know y'all know what I'm saying. I hope you do. But yeah, they're the prime examples, you know and for me, it didn't come that way for me. It wasn't translated that way for me. you know um my parents divorced when I was very young, and shortly after that my father remarried. And you know she was and my father's been married a few times, okay? So he's not married to this person anymore. But yeah, she was the classic, like, Disney villain, evil stepmother type. you know, she had those vibes. She used my father for the benefit of her and her kids. Like, true story. Like, all of this is true. And, it felt like, when I would come around, because my dad was sort of like a weekend dad, every other weekend, or whatever, once a month, whatever it was. um you know Whenever I would come around, it seemed like she hated me. You know what I'm saying? She would call me names, when my father wasn't around. Like, she didn't do anything physically violent, but she was mean as hell. Like, she was mean. And when you're young, because I feel like I was six, I had to be around like 6, 7, 8, around that time. You start to absorb that stuff, and it starts to affect you. And you would think that you know you would have some type of support. And you know what, to be fair, I don't think my dad knew exactly what she was doing, when he wasn't around. um but I did start to notice that our relationship kind of changed. Like, I would start to see him less and less, because a lot of the attention would go to her. And if it wasn't on her, it was like on her kids. It's almost like he had like another little family. Um, and I just started to notice that I wasn't like a priority in his life anymore. Like I said, her needs took over, and then, it was his own needs, I guess, that took over. You know, I would start to see him less and less. And whenever I did, he was very critical of me, I felt like. He would compare me to, other little girls my age, and would make certain suggestions on how to be one of them. Because, I wasn't even like a really, to me, I wasn't really like a really, you know, strange kid. I was quiet. I was shy. Um, I was, unbeknownst to me at the time, developing a complex. Because of like some of the things that was said to me by adults. On top of like, just dealing with everyday kid stuff. But even at that time, I felt like, well, maybe that's what I should do. You know, it's coming from my dad. Maybe, you know, I need to get this, or maybe maybe I need to start wearing my hair like this, or doing certain things to try to make it grow long like these other little girls, you know. And you know, it was just a lot. And in order not to make this video so very long, I'm gonna cut it short right there. But you know, you feel me, you get the gist. It was like certain stuff like that. And you know, I feel like he may have thought that he was helping me. He probably thought he was helping me. But like I said, it actually developed a complex within me. You know, I started to become critical of myself and the things that, you know, I wanted to do. And you know, it just pulled me closer, you know, and closer inside this little shell. I started to shut down emotionally. You know, I stopped telling my mom that I loved her. Like, just saying I love you in general, not just to my mother, but to like other family members, or you know, that it kind of, it was, I didn't want to do it. I hated doing it. I didn't do it for my mom, and it became like a running joke, but I know it probably hurt her feelings. And you know, since then I've gotten better since then, y'all. But you know, that was then, this is now. Okay. um but I just sort of kept everybody at a distance. And you know, after that, the teen years came, and you know, your hormones kicks in, you know. So you know, I started dating a little bit, but because I was already like self-critical and had this low self-esteem, you know, I became an automatic people pleaser, especially when it came to the opposite sex, you know. um and this is not to say, like, you know, if you're into the same gender, or you know, into the same sex or whatever, that you know, this doesn't happen to you. This is just, you know, from my perspective, my story time. So you know, you put yourself where you see fit if this resonates for you. But yeah, I became a people pleaser, you know. So when I would date these losers that were just as, you know, superficial and, you know, materialistic as my father was, or kind of still is, I have to say. I would think, I would think, well, you know, there must be something wrong with me. You know, what can I do to make this person love me like I love them? And you know, I would think these things, and all this time, all of this, without having any examples of what real loved real love looks like or feels like, you know what I'm saying, on either side of my family. Not just, you know, with my father, you know, just either side of the family. No examples. Like, I can't think of any marriage, any commitment, any example of like real, genuine love. You know, you have some people, um, their parents been married for like 50 years, or you know, something like that. Not in my family, not on either side, baby. Like, no. And it's weird, you know, when, not really weird, that's not the word I want to use, but it's, you know, when I look at both sides of my family, it's like the women are like pretty dominant for the most part. But they only do that because, you know, they have this wall up. You know, they want to be in control because of all of the heartbreak and things that they've experienced. And you know, it trickled down. So yeah, it wasn't until later in life that I realized, you know, my father was, probably still is, a narcissist. You know, he has narcissistic tendencies, okay? And since I fed into that, instead of learning to love myself first, that energy stuck with me, and it led me to attract others just like him, causing like a vicious, heartbreaking cycle. Now, was everyone that I came across like that? No. Mm-mm. But what it was, whenever like somebody good came around, love interest, I should say, when they would, come around, I didn't give them the time of day. I didn't really give them the time of day. I would at first, but then as soon as like, this quote unquote bad boy came around, or, somebody with similar narcissistic tendencies or whatever came around, I just left Mr. Nice Guy in the dust, okay? And it was because I thought it was too easy. you know I had this paranoid complex, this paranoid way of thinking, like, if I don't have to like do extra shit, you know prove myself, or if they weren't a certain way, if they didn't act a certain way, I it just wasn't real. Which I know now is crazy. It's the things that you learn in life, okay? I know it's crazy now, but I have to be honest, that's how I felt. And I'm bearing, my soul right now. Because I know it's gonna help somebody, but that's just as how it was. I know I'm not the only one that experienced that. That paranoia that creeps in, and it's like, oh, he too nice. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with them? Why they being so nice to me? Why they showing me so much love? They got somebody on the side. What they want? They got a hidden agenda. What's that? You know what I'm saying? And even today, like, even though like I'm aware of these things, um, and I know it shouldn't be a thing here, it still creeps in. I have to check myself. Okay, the healing never stops. The healing never stops. You just become more aware, and then you just nip it in the bud. Okay, especially for me. But that paranoia talked me out of a good thing, of a potentially good thing. And so when I realized, when the cycle started, when I backtracked and I realized when all that mess started, and got to the root of it, that's when I started to just love on myself truly and unapologetically, like unconditionally, because I realized, like, man, like, I never had that from anyone in my life, really. And if I did, I didn't recognize it. So I decided to break that cycle and start with myself. Instead of looking for it in someone else, I started with myself. And that's the message for you. It's like the greatest love of all starts with self love. And that's when you start to recognize your flaws and your strengths, and love them both equally. Love all of them equally. That's when you know who you are and what you will and won't tolerate. That's when you start to look at the world and the people around you from a different perspective. You'll start to remove yourself from people and situations where that same love is unrequited. And then you replace them with those who are genuine and that align with their same values. So I want y'all to look in the mirror, okay? If you're on your phone, take your phone somewhere where a mirror is at, or, just do it after you watch this video, okay? Look in the mirror and tell yourself the price just went up. Yesterday's price is not today's price. Okay? Know your worth, baby, and add tags. Okay? Take your past experiences as lessons learned, and don't be afraid to take that leap into the future. Okay? Because you might just land on something beautiful and worthwhile. Okay? Y'all. This was some heavy, 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 heavy energy. I don't know who I'm speaking to, but for whoever I'm speaking to, maybe you just went through a heartbreak, or your heart has turned to stone after so many disappointments and heartaches, okay? And I hope this message finds you, and I hope it heals you, or at least start the healing process. Okay, it's long, it's hard, you know. It requires you to look deep inside yourself, and shine a light on your shadow self. I know people don't like that. People don't like looking at the dark things and the flaws and stuff within ourselves, but you have to, in order to love yourself truly and completely. Okay, it's really rewarding, and it'll attract the things that you really want. Okay, you know my childhood things with my father or whatever, it hurt me at the time. It's still, I still have a sore spot, but it doesn't define me. I was determined. Look at me, tongue tied. I was determined to not let it define me anymore. And I'm happy to say I tell you these things, that things are gonna come towards you that align with your same values, because it's the same things that I've experienced. I wouldn't tell y'all anything that I haven't done myself, that I haven't experienced within myself. Okay, so yeah, just take this advice. Do your affirmations in the mirror every day. Learn to love yourself. Okay, self-love is the greatest love of all. If you don't love yourself, how you expect other people to love you? Okay, message. All right. See y'all next week for another Wisdom Wednesday, aka Thoughtful Thursday, since I record these so freaking late. And I love each and every one of y'all. Okay. What's a song, a Marley song, that I can dedicate this to? Is it love? Is this 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 love that I'm feeling? Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah. So y'all look that up. Is This Love by Bob Marley. That's the song of this video. All right. See y'all next week. Bye-bye.